So brave.
We've been very
Yeah, I
quiet,
can't help it.
anticipating your arrival. This has been solemnity here, since before you came.
He's been singing songs about you.
I'm not surprised.
Please, alternate occupation.
Well, we had a glass break last night mysteriously, did we not?
We did.
Strangely, during our time in the pub, your glass was suddenly, it looked like a glass cutter. For no apparent, I wasn't even singing.
Welcome to our
Yeah,
Demonology
it did. That was
comedy
straight
show.
out.
Here at the Best Western Head We hope you've had a lot of laughs, and I think there will be more to come. I think I need to get away from the speaker because I can only hear myself. Just so you know, my name is Elise Giammarco Carlson. I'm with Panorama Paranormal. Sounds like a huge group, but it's me and him. I'm the director, I'm the executive producer, I am the lead investigator, I am the cinematographer, I am the...
Usually the driver, I like your
And the
car.
driver. My main area of interest is parapsychology, and we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about demonology. And what is demonology? Well, hopefully by the end of the night, you will know what demonology is. So, I know you all know who these gentlemen are, but I want to give a short introduction, just in case you don't know someone's name. So you have, of course, James Anito from Cranston, Rhode Island. Carl Johnson from North Providence, Rhode Island.
Pretty close.
Right?
Yeah.
You think I'm up, huh?
You managed to
Sean Austin from Stratford, Connecticut, or at least that's what it said on your Facebook page.
As a reason, yeah.
Athena Gillis from a town I don't know in Ohio.
It's also a town I don't want to know.
To me, they're all the same. So
Yeah, right. That's true.
You're from Ohio. Michael Salerno from Old Lyme, Connecticut.
Close.
Wait,
East line.
East Lyme. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I wrote that down
That's all right.
incorrectly.
They have Lyme disease in both. So.
What you're famous for. And of course, Keith Johnson, all the way from Warwick, Rhode Island. So these are your panel of demonologists for tonight. So this is going to be an interactive night where you get to ask the questions of these gentlemen that you want to know your answers to. I figured we get started by me asking one question so they could tell you a little bit more about themselves, maybe something you didn't know. And then we'll go to, you can raise a hand and say you'd like to ask a question of one or all of the panelists. And I'm going to ask you gentlemen to keep your answers under 30 minutes. So that we might get more than a few of the questions answered. So, let's begin. You're all paranormal investigators, as are a lot of our audience members here. What made you narrow your scope to demonology and not ufology or chasing Bigfoot or any other study of paranormal? Start with James.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you for coming tonight. Dual Demonology hosted this, and Sam gave me the option. We just to give a little bit of feedback to this really quickly. I know we have 30 minutes each. But I appreciate every single one of you guys coming tonight. Thank you guys, panelists, and Elise, of course, the moderator. Thank you so much. My son is also in attendance, so thank you guys for coming tonight. And to be honest, this is something, if you follow the paranormal field, if you follow demonology specifically, this is kind of a historic night. There's never been a moment, as long as I've been alive or speaking in the convention circuit, where panelists of demonologists have come together to put their differences aside or their theological differences aside and sit together and talk about the topic. We have 200 years of experience up here, guys. That's a lot of experience, and we're about to unfold to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. So, I'm James Anito. I am ordained deacon to the Catholic Church. I was also an ordained deliverance minister to the Church of Christ. I'm also, by day, a project manager in the HVAC field. I've been investigating the paranormal for 16 years, since the lovely age of 15 years old. But what got me into demonology was the fact that I had questions about God and theology and did God exist? And of course, many of us had grown up with paranormal in our life. There was Leonard Nimoy, there was Unsolved Mysteries, Scooby-Doo. And it's relevant, guys. Come on, rewatch it and see how relevant it is. But we all grew up on this. Of course, you know, being Rhode Island, I grew up on Ghost Hunters, the man next to me, and the guy all the way down in the Twins. They were on the first 2 seasons. So it enamored me. But the biggest thing that could come close to the answer of God was, did angels and demons exist? And I was given a great opportunity about, 11 years ago now, 10 years ago, where I was asked to be the tech manager of Carl Johnson and of other individuals' group.
Yeah, that goes back precisely 11 years.
So that is what started my journey, and
You
I
weren't
thought,
even shaving, I don't think.
no, I still can't shave, guys. I have a gold beard. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously though, but that's what got me started. This is why I'm in demonology, because of the fact that I do believe there's evil now, but I was really in search if good and evil did exist to solve God.
How did I become specialized in demonology, and not just paranormal investigation? And branch of it is demonology. This movie, The Exorcist, came out, had a lot to do with it. But actually, my first residential case was out in Harrisville, part of Burrville, Rhode Island, and it was Round Top Farm, and it's become the subject of the movie franchise The Conjuring. That's my first residential case, and that was in August of 1973. We'll go ahead a few years. My second residential case turned out to be a situation of full-blown demonic possession, and that's what fascinated me and drew me into demonology as a study and an avocation. It's always evolving. We say demonology because we don't have clinical terms to apply to this. You know, the nomenclature seems kind of archaic. I mean, really, I'm a thonicist, which is somebody who explores, as is James, explores underworld spirits and like the classic Grecian underworld gods and deities. But you say you're a thonicist, oh, do you treat veins or what? You're not going to be invited to a lot of parties anyway. But you say demonologist, people turn around. So we say, it's archaic, but we say demonologist. Hi, Sandra. I said demonologist, and you were here. Come close.
Right here, I get some like your sector guys.
Yeah. Sit at the elitist table there. So that's really what fascinated me, and in that case, I won't go into all the details now because we're limited in time, but there was a moment where I just felt I don't belong here. I don't feel right. They think I'm some kind of expert. That's why I'm here. I don't know what to tell these people. I know back at my parents' house, there's food in the refrigerator. It's a 20-minute drive back, and I just want to go leave this chaos. But another part of me jumped in and said, if I leave these people, if I leave this home now, this family, if this guy leaves, what hope is there for us? He's supposed to be some kind of knowledgeable person. And I got my second wind, and this was all an internal conflict of about a minute. I said, no, I have to see this out, because if I leave now, I don't think I'll ever be able to return to another hairy situation like this, something that's challenging. It was horrendous, it was fascinating, it was brutal, it was downright scary, but it was resolved successfully, and that's how I entered the field of demonology. Why am I known as a demonologist? Well, I had several such cases. It seemed it found me. You had that. It comes back. I started being invited to help out in what would be suspected of being demonic cases. And somebody brought a magazine article to my attention. You're in this article here. I said, oh, am I? Is this Carl Johnson, demonologist? Yeah, all right, I'll go with that. All right, it's in print. I can verify it now. Some of my ideas, I'm surprised I haven't been called to turn in my demonologist badge, but that's how I became demonologist.
Well, I just want to say thank you, James and Carl, for you guys setting this up. This is kind of a unique, obviously, subject in general, and the taboo corner of the paranormal. And I think even when I was on that side of the spectrum, watching these shows and wondering about this stuff, I mean, I think that a lot of us think about the most extreme activity that'll take place in the paranormal, and that excites us, it's thrilling, but, you know, obviously experiencing this stuff firsthand, it's a different ball game, and you see how delicate and dangerous this stuff really is, because it truly is real. For me, you know, I was thrown into the paranormal by mistake. And again, to reiterate about watching shows like A Haunting, which, you know, I know you were on a bunch of those episodes back in the day. I knew this guy's face even before I was, you know, involved in the paranormal. And, you know, being interested and fascinated, and really just taking a real close look at some of these people and what they're experiencing in their homes, and these fascinating stories of paranormal activity. And I just really believed in their stories, but what happened to me was in the process of trying to prove to a friend that's a real crazy skeptic, I took him to a local cemetery that had a lore of 3 women in white that would chase you out. And in this process during the night, when I'm sitting there trying to just to prove to him that the paranormal's real, is that I was in front of this little girl's grave, and I had a flip phone right before we had these smartphones, and I recorded a little EVP, and I didn't know until the next night when I listened back to some of these quick little recordings that this little girl responded to me in a little girl's voice, and it was a defining moment and trigger, if you will, for me into the paranormal. It was horrifying, it was terrifying, but it was exhilarating, and it was just like, wow, now I want to start going out and having these experiences. I want to learn more from these experiences, and I'd be going out and experimenting to increase that tier of knowledge with these experiences I would have. And throughout, actually the first 2-3 weeks after getting that EVP of a little girl, I saw a shadow of a little girl in the corner of my bed. It was even white out, just like this. And it seemed to be some sort of trigger into my spiritual awakening immediately, and being sensitive to this stuff as well. But I want to also take back to what Carl was talking about, the cases and stuff, and being drawn back to these, you know, demonic cases. You know, I was starting to do podcasts, and people would call me on just as I was getting involved in the paranormal, and they would pull me on, and I'd be discussing the subject, and people would be telling me, like, you have a calling. And I'm just like, I don't know what you mean, like a calling to what? And they were saying demonology, and I'm just like, at the time I really didn't know what they meant, but it seems that, you know, just like yourself, and there's someone like Ed Warren, and it seems like demonology is something that you're called to do, and something that even in these cases, and once you actually become involved in the work, these cases do get drawn to you. They come out of nowhere, and it's just like these specific types of hauntings come to you for whatever that reason. And obviously there's no conception of time in the spirit realm. As past, present, future, all the same thing, but you know, that's really how it happened to me. Like, I was just researching the paranormal, investigating, but it seemed like I was going out and learning about the dark stuff because it was coming to me. And you know, the books that I was reading, the first book I ever read was The Demonology by Edward Warren, and then John Zappa's book, Shadows of the Dark, I think it's called, and then Ralph Sarchi's book, which ended up being my mentor in demonology, if you know who that is. He's an NYPD sergeant, retired. That was the inspiration for the movie Deliverance from Evil. Yeah, I'm humbled to be around some of those people during those time periods when it wasn't cool to be a paranormal investigator and everyone wanted to be on TV. People are doing it for the research and the experience and the knowledge to share it and to truly try to help people. And you know, it's really interesting and fascinating to be in some of those people's presence. And just like, you know, the two of you guys, you know, the Johnsons, and watching that side of the spectrum. But thank you for being here, and I'm really psyched to have this conversation further.
All right, so I have a little bit of a different background. I grew up in the evangelical movement, and then my dad's a pastor, and so while I was going to a local church, I was also experiencing malevolent haunting in my house. So I was going to Sunday school. My experiences eclipsed the blueprint of demonology I was given, and so I needed to stretch myself into new thoughts and new dimensions. So the older I became, the more I involved myself into the literature of the ancient Near East to understand the difference between a demon and disincarnate consciousness, why they demonstrate memory and language preference. So that's more of my background, and it's just, you know, it's funny because we all have our own journeys, you know. We all have our own gifts, and you're exactly right. It's not just a curiosity. This has to be a calling, because when you start looking at the darkness, it will acknowledge you. It will find you. So I'm glad to be next to like-minded people, and this is my very first Paracon. I was nervous yesterday, and just want to thank everybody for you know accepted me, and just really excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, hi, my name is Michael Salerno. I am a Catholic demonologist. I work with the traditional Catholic Church in Monroe. Actually, the church is right next to where Ed and Lorraine Warren's grave is. About 14 years ago, I was going about my life and I broke my finger. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it got infected with MRSA. And I was pretty close to dying by the time I got to the hospital. And when I was recovering, I was watching TV, and my wife came in and she said, "I know you're pretty bored, you've been watching everything. Why don't you watch this show, A Haunting? It's different." And I said, "Well, geez, I don't know if I'm that bored." And so I gave it a shot, and the show that I was watching was about a paranormal investigator who actually became possessed after she investigated a case that was left, had a trap left by a satanic group for any investigator that would come. And there was one part of that show that I was watching that said she went under possession and her sister was a religious person. She was a Catholic. And the demon that took her over said, "What is it about your God that you love so much? What's he ever done for you?" And she looked at the religious sister, the demon did it. I mean, the other woman looked at the sister and she said, "Well, he's my protector. That's what he is to me." And for some reason, that flicked on a light switch in my head. Before that happened, I went through church. I was Episcopal. And when I turned 18, I was like, yes, I don't have to go anymore. And now I was 40 and I was sick and I didn't ask God for any help. But all of a sudden, this light switch went on and I rewound it and watched it again and again. And I called my wife, who's right here. This is Jen. This is my wife. And I said, "You got to sit here and watch this with me." And she said, "What?" And I said, "Well, just watch it." And she watched it. And I said, "That's what I'm supposed to be doing." And she said, "What, becoming possessed?" I said, no, I'm supposed to be helping people with these issues. And she says, "Well, okay, here we go." Well, yeah, here we went. And I went down to the used bookstore and I bought every book that I possibly could find on the paranormal. Ouija boards, tarot cards, psychic readers, paranormal investigators, and The Demonologist by Ed and Lorraine Warren. When I got done reading the book, I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing. Within a year, I had met Lorraine. I had talked to her about everything that I was going through and what I wanted to do. And she looked at me and she said, "I'll help you in any way I possibly can, anytime. Here's my number. You call me anytime you want." And it just snowballed from there. If someone had told me 14 years ago that there was a ghost in their house, I probably would have said, "Yeah, okay. Give me some of that." But yeah. But since I've started, this has really turned into something that I've been able to help so many people. I've been able to travel to several parts of the country, helping people that couldn't find help anywhere else. I now work with the team that's left for NASPR, which is the Warren's Legacy Group. And I have my own group, which is just me and another guy. And we've helped many people and we want to continue doing so. So thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I hope I'm able to answer your questions and help you understand a little bit more about what we do.
Thank you. God bless you.
It's so good to see all of you today. It's such a blessing to have you all here. And my background was very much like my brothers Carl. We were identical twins, grew up as identical twins. Still are. Get away from it. Still have the same blood type. DNA. But, when I was very, very young, I mean about the ages of 4 to 6 years old, I began having out-of-body experiences, and usually upon waking up or shortly before waking up. And these beings would come to me. I didn't know they were angels. I just called them the friends at first. And we would, they would take me places, and they say, you're not going to always remember this, but know that we're with you and there's a purpose for this. And I have my parents to thank for bringing me up and teaching me the Bible and helped me understand the Bible before I was able to understand it myself. And actually, they were the ones who taught me about angels and demons. I became intensely fascinated. My brother and I did experience quite a bit of paranormal activity in our home while growing up. And it did seem to be classic angelic and demonic. I began studying it very, very intently. When I was around the age of 15, I decided this is what I feel I'm meant to do, except I don't really know what I'm doing, but you have to take it step by step and prayerfully. And then when I was around the age of 17, I really felt I was called to be helping people in this situation. And I said, well, I know, of course, this was long before the internet or anything. How am I prayed, how am I ever going to do this? You should be doing this. How am I going to do it? It was just a matter of weeks later, my brother and I met Ed and Lorraine Warren at Rhode Island College, a lecture they were giving. And we became lifelong friends with them. And also, we met a group called Pyro at Rhode Island College, an on-campus club, parapsychological investigation and research organization. And while I was a member of that, I put an ad about us in the paper because, again, there was no internet. 3 weeks to the day it was answered, and it was answered by Carolyn Perrin from Harrisville, Rhode Island, Round Top Row. She was having a disturbance in her house. Could we please listen to her story and maybe help her out? So we listened to her story. She asked if we'd mind. She spoke very well, very coherently, although I know she was very upset. She had dark circles under her eyes, besides being a very attractive woman. Her hands, her fingers were shaking. But she said, would you mind coming out to the farmhouse? She asked if we thought she was crazy. I said, absolutely not. We're going to do everything we can to help you. That's the first time I ever saw her smile. So we did come to the farmhouse, and while we were there, we had many, many experiences. We knew it was genuine. As soon as we set foot on the property, it was almost as if there was a barrier we could hardly cross. We knew something didn't want us there, although the Perrin family were a very, very beautiful family. And the young girls, Andrea's younger sisters, grabbed me by the wrist, and they were going to give me a tour because I had very long hair. And they liked me immediately because I was very thin, I had very long hair. That was very in style at the time. And they took me, I know Carla had some experiences inside the house, but finally they took me upstairs to the bedroom where they were most frightened. And there was a window in this bedroom that could not be closed, and Carla will attest to that. Roger and Carla tried to push it down. They even tried taking a hammer to it. Because of the August humidity, it was just so hot that it wouldn't close. While I was in the bedroom, you could just feel this oppressive energy just pulling and pulling out of you. And I asked the girls, well, do you have any religious beliefs? And they said, oh yes, we're Catholic. And I said, well, when you're afraid, try calling upon the name of Jesus. As soon as I said that name, that window came down so hard it shook the room. Nancy Perrin was slapped on the left side of her head, which is very significant with the demonic. Came in a counterclockwise direction, slapped her on the left side of her head. She started screaming, almost went off the bed. The girls were crying and screaming. And I just told them, call upon the name of Jesus, because it's much more afraid of Jesus than you are of it. And then it left the room. Suddenly everything turned to normal. They all perked up. It's gone, it's gone. It didn't leave the house, but it left the room. And so we went downstairs, and the girls told their mother, Carolyn, what had just happened. And so this day I'm convinced it was not a human spirit. I believe it was an inhuman spirit there, called the telltale signs. And of course, like my brother said, our next in-home case was a demonic case, and with the Atlantic Paranormal Society, we did many cases that turned out to be demonic too, and I became one of the TAPS demonologists. And it's not a term that I throw around lightly, and I always tell people I do not have a certificate from the Vatican saying you are an accredited demonologist. It's just a description, it's what I do, and it does help. As you know, it helps to bring people to you with your expertise. Thank you very much.
Oh, by the way, your food is coming out in a minute. I just got verified, sorry.
For those in the back, your food's coming. So as you can see, there is no cut and dry definition of a demonologist. Every one of these men have had different experiences that have drawn them into it, or they were drawn to get into this. And with that in mind, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask any certain member of the panel, or any member of the panel, all of them? Who would like to start?
Yes, I was curious, this is actually for Hannah. What's your most unique experience in demonology?
Would you like to take a couple of minutes to explain?
So I think any case that you deal with an individual in their household, there's a dynamic that's very interesting that you'll never experience with the next person, because you gotta remember, we're all different, and we all have different names, we all have different socials. Yes, we have twins, as you can tell, there's 2 twins up here, but we're all different. And so dealing with any dynamic of a household is a new experience. You can use the characteristics and the forms of a haunting to kind of diagnose a situation. But the individuals at play are part of that puzzle as well. I would say my most defining moment, or the moment that will always follow me, is my first demonic case in Salem, Massachusetts, in the apartment buildings. I can't say names because of it, but it was a psychologist that called me in. And this was one of the first times that a psychologist called me in, because usually I reach out to seek guidance from somebody as a psychotherapist or psychologist to determine if these people have a psychosis issue, disorder, something within the DSM-5 that can clinically give them a diagnosis of this is what they're dealing with. And you always have to tackle that before you tackle the supernatural. So I was called in by the psychologist, and they were dealing with a lot of experiences. This case tormented her. She was almost pulled in a closet by this dark figure of an arm that multiple people have seen. There were a lot of people involved with this case, such as Ken DeCosta, the Ocean State Paracon, and a lot of people dabbled in this case. And I was called in after a Buddhist monk, Leo Martin, of Eclipse Paranormal, and they tried to do a Buddhist ritual there because they worked closely. Of course, they were Christian, so it worked to a degree where there was some comfort. Mind you, this is a married couple, 22-year-old and 21-year-old wife, woman, and they had a baby. And a lot of the situations that were going on, of course, the psychologist was worried about the child because he had threatened to kill the baby and actually had killed their cat. So this person was sectioned initially because, of course, you don't not know what you're doing. And basically, after all the symbiosis of that case of to the point where I got involved, which was startling to me. Like I said, a psychologist is never the one to call a demonologist. 90%, 95, 98% of the time. I don't know if any of these guys have ever been called by one. Usually, like I said, to beat the dead horse, we do. So that is something that's very important to understand. So I dealt with this case. I never believed in demons at that point. I was involved in demonology, had read the literature.
Were you involved with the church system?
What is it? I was a pastoral assistant for the Church of Christ at that point in time. And I was close to, of course, completing my assistancy with him to become a minister within the Church of Christ. So I was very close. I was there as, of course, a deliverance minister in just earnest. But, so what had happened is, while ready to do a blessing of the house, because, of course, we would think that we would attempt this to see if it would lighten any situation. Usually have the homeowners leave the complex unless they really want to be a part of it. Because, you know, they've already gone through so much trauma. I want them to exit the building just in case there is any repercussions that occur. You don't need a dynamic that you do not want to be a part of what you're trying to do. You don't want no monkey in the wrenches. There, of course, those do come, but the homeowner, the male, who was of course under this affliction mainly, did not want to leave, and we had basically sat him down after he basically grabbed an archway made of sheetrock and it started crumbling upon his strength. It is possible to do that as a human, but it takes a lot of strength. I'm pretty sure you'd be bleeding from your fingernails and your fingertips, and a lot of other situations your hand would be going on trying to crumble sheetrock. I work in construction. It's very hard to break sheetrock, it's heavy. And he was crumbling and was falling upon his head. I had two bouncers there, Phil McRae and Paul Davis, who was a shaman, big guys that used to be bouncers, 300 pounds. We had those two individuals aid this male into the chair. And of course, I had my bag, my crucifix and my saw, and of course my prayers. Because we could see there was a heightened situation going on. And his eyes did turn black. His face started to triangulate, so his cheekbones started structured in a point. And he started speaking what we would say speaking in tongues, but of course it was broken languages, mumble jumbo, many things trying to speak to this person, this individual. And the craziest thing I will say from that case is why it follows me. Not only did it verify that I believe demons exist, that evil exists, but I carried a rosary with me that was specially made by Luxury Laces. I knew Jack, the owner, and he made beautiful rosaries. Some of their it sounds corny, but some of the rosaries you've seen were at Jersey Shore, like made by Paulie D and all that stuff. So I knew the guy very well, and he made me a very beautiful rosary. And I had that, and it was of course blessed by, of course, the minister. And he dislocated his shoulder. I heard the pop and was able to get it because he lunged the table, and these guys pinned this guy against the wall, dislocated his shoulder, and grabbed the rosaries, shattered them. And I never realized until a few days later, where I seen if they were repairable, because they were a very beautiful pair of rosaries, that I seen tarnish marks where he had grabbed it. And that kind of metal does not oxidize in that form of fashion, not like copper hitting another metal. So it was really impossible for where he had grabbed it for it to tarnish, and that was always going to follow me to this day because of that situation. It was my first demonic case that made me acknowledge. The crazy thing, I know I'm over 2 minutes here, but the craziest thing that happened after that case is all the people that were involved in that case split apart. Our friendships broke. We were at each other's throats, and it was a bloodshed for a long time with people calling each other out, and it was a very sadistic situation.
Thank you.
Well, as I remember the question was like, outstanding moments in demonology's case, demonic case. There has to be two that I cite. That would be the case of Lucas in Providence, Rhode Island, the possessed boy. He was 14 years of age. I was asked to stay overnight to observe. I forget how bad could it be. My initial pre-assessment was that Lucas had some form of epilepsy and perhaps what they used to call dissociative personality disorder, and that's what was making it seem like he was going under this possession. Well, I stayed overnight, and I was dozing off around 1 in the morning, and I was on a sofa outside of his bedroom. At around 1, suddenly I was startled awake by an ear-splitting scream. And I fumbled for the light on the wall switch, and the overhead light came on, and Lucas's bedroom door opened up, and out came Lucas, the 14-year-old boy, being tossed about and careening into the walls. It was like he was being picked up and thrown, but you have to picture a room about half of the size, and his body, but splat, splash, splat, hitting the walls like this, that rapidly. I stood transfixed. What am I going to do? Like, watch this. And then his body started to spin on the floor, and I mean, like that, going around. It wasn't accelerated motor performance. He was, being tossed about and screaming. Then he did a backward somersault, landed on the sofa on which I had been reclining, and this deep growl and laughter came out of his throat. And at this point, the other family members came from downstairs. We were on the third floor at this point, and they came in in time to see Lucas turn and lunge at me. And I had to spring to action. I tried to restrain him without injuring him, and he pushed me right off. Then he came to himself, but he was panicking and crying. So that's when we decided to, for the next week in that house, we devised an expulsion, which is a minor form of exorcism, and that was horrendous in itself. And another case I have to cite is the Marin's case in Coventry, Rhode Island. And generally, those who've been involved in paranormal investigation, you know that you often hear, oh, things were happening before you guys came. My crucifix was pulled off my neck, and my necklace was, and you hear, oh, all hell broke loose after your team left. But things were happening while we were there. This was a poltergeist and demonic. To me, my definition of a demon is a poltergeist with a really poor attitude. And, so this thing, it was, the first thing we saw it do was that two of the ladies went around the house and, asked them to go around and say a blessing and see what they felt. And I was called in as a demonologist. So the two ladies were coming up the stairs, and right down the dinner plate, some crockery flew across the room and smashed into a wooden post, just shattered there. And we were hearing smashing and breaking, and there was just, things were moving on their own. Now granted, there were some unique ramifications. The couple did have 7 children. And the lady of the house she wondered why she had problems. She and her sister were from the old world, from the Azores. They had 10 Ouija boards they owned. 3 of them they burned, 7 were lost. So you've got a tinderbox there. But we're watching things. It's like they almost created, I don't know if they created this or brought in the poltergeist. So many weird things were happening. I was sitting there, and my chair with me, and it moved back, which is the second time I've had that experience. My chair with me, and it moved back across the room to the wall. At one time, I think it was our second visit, we were in the master bedroom, and a dinner plate appeared over my head and smashed on the floor in front of me. He said, oh my God, it came out of the wall, it came out of the wall. She was from France, and the lady was from it came out of the wall, over there. So I started to pick up the shards, and I said, this is damp and warm. Tina, the lady in the house, I said, Tina, what does this tell you? She said, oh my God, that came from my dishwasher. I was 3 rooms away. And they saw it appear over my head. A kitchen knife came down the hallway. It wasn't spinning, it just and it hit the thermograph that I was holding. And it didn't hit my hand, it hit the instrument I was holding, it splattered to the floor. And Tina said, that's not one of my dinner knives. And I said, all these things were happening. We did an overnight there. We did it till like 3:30 a.m. And Dawn, the lead investigator, called me and she said, what should I do now? I said, ask if it misses Tina and Tony, the homeowners. Ask if it misses Tina. They'd gone out for the night. She said, do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home? And when I played back the recording, I thought, oh, well, I'm going to listen to a lot of chatter. About 50 minutes into this recording. And then I heard Dawn says, do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home? And the sibilant voice says, well, we got something. I played it back, augmented sound. And it was the voice that said, yes, do you want Tina home? And this deep male voice says, oh yeah, I'd like to boil Tina. Imagine when we did the reveal and played that for Tina. One of the ladies, one of our investigating team, she kept, it was my brother's team at the time here, doing the anomalous research, and she was in Sanders, and she kept exotic birds herself, Laura, and she was scraping and cleaning the cage, because Tina kept 2 lovebirds, but the cage was very messy, she didn't care very well for her animals. So Laura's cleaning the cage, and she says to the 2 lovebirds, how you doing, babies? Okay, we're recording everything. Play back the audio recording. Laura says, how you doing, babies? A woman's voice answers. She says, dying. In less than 2 weeks, both of those birds had died. So it was one thing after the other, after the other. I don't have it with me, but there's a horrendous picture of an entity, because several times they were driven out of the house. And when they, this family was, they go over to the sister's house. And Tony had the presence of mind to go back in and grab his camera, because paranormal evidence was there. He took a picture of a figure he saw standing at the top of the stairs. And it really, really looks demonic. All these things are going on. And I actually saw the male entity. We were sitting at the long wooden kitchen table. I happened to look up, and there's this man looking at me. So mundane. I said, "What, they got another guest here?" And he's looking at me very intently, and then he just vanished. You know, so. And I'd like to say, boy, we went in and helped those people and resolved it. No, couldn't do much for them except document. And they were driven out of their home and had to sell it. You know, I think they'd been there 3 years, and they were driven out. Interesting case study, though, in psychology as well as parapsychology.
Thank you.
I would actually mention what comes to mind. It's obviously been on my mind because I just, pretty much finished filming a documentary regarding this case. It's the worst, most harrowing demonic case that I've dealt with, and I think probably the worst case scenario I can think of dealing with the demonic. And it's something that I dealt with as I was just reading books about demonology. I wasn't versed in enough, like I really didn't know what to do in this situation. And what happened was this girl contacted me online, and she had said that she was starting to get scratched and stuff like that, and showing me pictures. And then, I was just learning about the paranormal. So I was just like, yeah, I've seen someone get scratched before, this and that. She kind of disappeared for a while, and she came back, and she, said all hell is breaking loose now. She had actually had a child, and this child was 3 years old, and now she's pregnant with her second child, and now she's starting to trance out and have these crazy, just horrific experiences going on. And I'll give you a bunch of those examples that I actually experienced with her, and I experienced activity. And this girl was actually thousands of miles away from me, down south. It still baffles me to this day, some of the stuff that actually happened. But what would happen was just every day would be like a minefield. This girl would call me all the time, something crazy happening. And here's the thing, she was pregnant. And nobody wanted to touch this case with a 10-foot pole, because if something happened to the child, then they could be held responsible for it. And it makes you think about, if you're familiar with the case of Annalise, when the priest and the family actually were charged for negligent homicide because they believed that they were trying to drive a demon out, but when she had that scientific, psychological issue that was going on, so she actually, I believe she starved to death, if I stand correct, right?
Malnutrition.
Yeah.
Malnutrition was the diagnosis.
So, no one wanted to touch this case, and then I felt somehow emotionally sucked into this case and invested to try to help this girl because I didn't know what to do. And I just tried to help her in any way I can, and the way I did that was trying to help her, guide her, and also have her document anything that would happen, because when the time came when she did give birth to the child, then maybe all this evidence that I have stacked up would be the right time to get her an exorcism, when the child would be safe. And all these crazy things would happen. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples because it's pretty damn disturbing. One of the times she would trance out, and she'd come out of it, and she'd look up in the bathroom, and she'd see these symbols written on the mirror that were occult symbols. And she also had a screwdriver in her hand, and she'd actually drawn an upside down cross with the screwdriver on her pregnant belly, and not even knowing that she actually did it. So again, to me, to reiterate, that's probably the worst thing I could ever think of. Imagine being a mother with an unborn child inside you, and you're dealing with the characteristics of some sort of possession, and you could literally tap out and wake up and not know if you harmed or possibly even killed your own child. I mean, that's literally the most horrific thing I could ever think of. And this would just go on, things like this. She would call me, she'd be joking on the phone, and I'd hear laughing coming through the phone, and I'd run to get my recorder and record some of these things. And at the time, again, I was way over my spiritual pay grade. I was alone in this situation for the most part. Again, I was recording these things, and she would start to trance out and speak in tongues. And some of the recording, I would listen to it. I was fascinated at the same time. I'm just like, what is she saying? What kind of language is this? And I actually put some of it in reverse to try to decipher, to see if there's some sort of sense I could make out of it. And she was speaking perfect English backwards on certain segments of the, what she was saying. And it blew my mind. And she was actually referring and talking about exorcism, talking about the baby in English backwards. And this would just continue over and over for months. And I'm just going to give you some more examples. And for me, I really had a defining moment for my faith in one of these moments, which I'll tell you. This girl was 23 years old at the time. And one of these times she would be on the phone with me, and I have this recording. I'm praying for her and choking, she's getting choked and screaming. And at one point I felt burning on my arm, and I had 13 slashes show up on my arm. This girl's thousands of miles away, and I'm looking, looked like a cat had its way all over my arm. And I had that picture too. And, out of nowhere, she goes silent, and you just hear this voice go, "Sean, she's mine." Just like you'd think out of a freaking movie. And it sounds like a layered voice. It sounds like there's more than one voice in there. There's no way this 23-year-old girl could do some of the things that's happening. And I'm getting physically attacked in my house too, and I'm having strange activity. Another one for the books here. It's just because there's so many examples, but she had a three-year-old at the time, and again, she would call me when she would start to trance out, and she's like, "Sean, I can feel like it's trying to come, inside me," and she would explain it. She'd feel this pain in the back of her neck when something would try to come through. If you're not familiar, it's where one of your chakra points are, and where a lot of believe that the spirits will try to possess you through that entry point. And she calls me, and she goes silent, and there's her 3-year-old in the background. And I don't hear anything. All of a sudden, the 3-year-old goes, "Look, mommy's floating." And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to have the kid actually take a video. And he was taking selfies of himself. And actually, when we interviewed this poor kid, he actually said that he remembered it at 3 years old, and that he felt like something was trying to prevent him from filming it, because every time he pressed the camera button, it kept him turning around and facing himself. And that doesn't surprise me if that's the case, because these things do not want to be documented. They do not want to be exposed for their true intentions and what they're trying to do until they're forced to do so, and they have the most permission and invitation to do as much chaos as they possibly can. I'm just going to give you a couple more examples. One of the really disturbing things too that happened, one time she called me, and she's like, "My son's going crazy, he's running around the house, and he's singing a song, he's got his shirt off, and he's making a gesture, and going, 'Draw the cross upside down, draw the cross upside down, big bad wolf, mark of the beast 666. I'm 3 years old. So at the time, again, I just was reading books about demonology, and I was really curious because these priests would say, a demon's absolutely incapable of saying, "I love Jesus." So I told her to ask her son, tell the big bad wolf, ask him if he can say, "I love Jesus." So this kid in the background starts howling. I'm like, "Oh, great." So she's like, "He wants to speak to you." And I'm just going to bleep out one of the words what he said, but just imagine how disturbing this is. He's like, he gets on the phone and he goes, "You better watch out tonight." He says, "The big bad wolf, he's going to come to you in your sleep. He's going to bite your beep off and spit it on your chest." At 3 years old. And these are some of the disturbing things that I would experience throughout all these months until this baby was born. And unfortunately, this baby did pass away. It had complications, and that was something that I actually went to John's office about, because I had just met John at the time. It was within years of me just involving myself in paranormal. He was right, because I asked him, like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Sean, these people, these girls, they mess around with the witchcraft and they become pregnant, and they either have complications or they pass away." And in this case, it tragically both happened. And there's a lot more to the story, and I think that's why this documentary that just made it so important, even though it's not exactly a happy ending, but if it can sway away one person or many people from messing around with this stuff and preventing another scenario like this poor girl went through, and how brave she is to come and tell her story, then I think that's bringing something light into something that's truly dark. And I look for synchronicities and everything, and then this baby lived for 18 months, 6 + 6 + 6, and was born prematurely, 36 weeks, 6 times 6. And there's a lot of strange synchronicities with this. There was even a symbol that showed up on her pregnant belly that an occult specialist told me that had something to do with infertility. And one last thing I'll just say, I actually had a vision one night where I was in a room and she was in the corner and she was staring off into nothing with her eyes changing colors. And I knew this thing was sitting next to me, and I bit down in my right earlobe, and I felt these sharp teeth, and it whispered in my ear this name, Astharte. I'd never heard this name before at the time. I didn't know what it was, and that's something that I look for with my dreams, to disseminate, whether it's mumbo jumbo random dream, or there's some sort of genuinity to my paranormal experience supernaturally wise with a dream. If something just, links up, and if I have to look up a word I've never heard or don't know what it is, then there's a clue there that I have to follow. And to look up and find out that this name, this demonic name, is a demonic goddess of fertility, to be connected to this. I mean, there's so many things that connect to this case, but it's just, that case is just the most unique and harrowing that I could ever imagine. I don't even think I could encounter something worse than that. Again, dealing with such an innocent child and being pregnant and being in that position.
Thank you.
That's horrible.
So I was working an Incubus case, and I got an email from a couple that had suffered a murder in their house. I had no idea that it occurred. When I walked outside of the Incubus house, the case I'm working on, I look at the house that I'm talking on the phone, right across the street. It's on North Church Street. When I got there, the husband was disabled. His daughter was 13 years old when she began to detach herself from the family. She began to perform witchcraft and work in the Ouija board in a room. Next thing you know, she started fighting suicide. She started cutting herself. And she had created a friendship with a girl at high school, or at school rather, who was much bigger than her, my daughter.
Are you okay, baby?
And her father had set her down, the 13-year-old, and said, look, I don't really appreciate this connection you made. I think this is a bad influence. He said next thing he knew, there began to be different manifestations in his house that this older girl had brought in, some kind of attachment or a spirit that she had conjured. Then one late night, he said, I was watching television with my wife, and I look outside the window, and that 15-year-old is standing outside with a mask on, staring at him. He said, so we started working with the 13-year-old, which is the daughter, trying to get her into counseling to figure out what's going on. He said one day, it was a school night, and he said, she walks down the stairs, opens the front door, and the 15-year-old walks in with a pair of stub-nose scissors, buries it in his wife's neck. A disembodied voice, a male voice, is coming out of the 15-year-old girl's body, and she's laughing. So when I got there, they had already cleaned up the crime scene, they cut the carpet, and you could feel a profound weight of consciousness in that house. It was heavy. It was thick. It was as if somebody had turned the lights off, even though the lights were on. I did my deliverance prayer, and something broke in that place. It was very unique. I've never experienced it since in my career. It was almost like an explosion happened, and there was heat all over the place. Matter of fact, the husband, he started shaking and crying. He said, it's so hot in here, it's so hot in here. I don't know what's going on. We actually watched these entities, it was almost like shadow people. Mr. Rick Secker, almost like shadow people, man. But it was almost as if somebody turned the light on, and you could literally see the darkness lift. 2 months to the day that I got the phone call to go to that case, I'm sitting in the same restaurant, same seat, and this couple sits down next to me. For some reason, I felt a connection, and I start talking to the husband. Next thing I know, the wife says, I want to talk about what he does, because I was reading some paranormal literature. Because I want to talk to you about what you're researching. I said, okay, fine. So we get into it. She says, have you had any cases recently? This is crazy. I said, yeah, actually, I obviously didn't give specifics. She said, well, I can tell you that I know who you are. I've heard of you, but I just can't tell you how. I said, okay. So it took me 35 minutes to get the truth out of her. She's the social worker that had been working with both of these children. Without them knowing that I had performed a cleansing in the house, there was the 12-year-old was in jail, went to her social worker and said, I don't know what happened tonight, but the demon that had possessed me walked into my cell and told me I no longer have authority over you. That was the most chilling aspect of it, because it was liberating for the family, and now they can finally grieve. I got a phone call from an atheist that was there who told me he didn't believe in spirits or anything. And he told me he had called all the pastors in Dayton, Ohio, to tell them exactly what had happened in that case. But that's probably the most profound, meaningful case I've had.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been listening to all these stories, and I'm gonna speak publicly for the first time about something that happened that defined basically my experience in this field. What I realized was, if the demonic can't get to you, meaning me or any of these, it will go after your loved ones. And it will go after whatever will hurt you the most. And I had received a call from someone I work with, Steve Shippey. I don't know if anyone knows who that is, to go out to Michigan and help with a case. About a month before I left to go do the case, my wife went under demonic attack and went under possession. It happened in the car on the way home, and I had to bring her into my house with both of my children, who were, they had no idea what was going on. Both of them been brought up in the faith, and they know what I do. And I went in, and my daughter was watching TV, and I told her, I said, listen, you gotta turn the TV off. And she's like, can't you watch it somewhere else? And I said, look, all right, your mom is under demonic attack right now. Please turn the TV off and go get your rosary. I'm gonna need your help. And so she went and got her brother, and needless to say, it was a long, long night. And this was a demon that came from the case in Michigan to try and keep me from going out there. Because if it could keep me busy in my own home, it knew I wouldn't go out and help Steve. So with the experiences that I've had, and the knowledge and the connections that I've made, and the priests that I work with, we were able to actually have a major rite of exorcism done within 2 weeks. If I wasn't in this field, there's no way that would have happened. Father Rodriguez, who I work with, is a blessing that has been sent to help and guide me. I thank God every day that my wife is okay. It's solidified at her faith. My faith was already solidified, but both of my kids, wow, you ask them, they believe, they've seen it. She ended up having knowledge that there's no way she could know. She went down into the basement to get away from us because we were talking about what was going on. And the one thing I found is that when someone you believe is going under demonic attack, if they say, I'm fine, when you ask them, are you okay? That is a sign. They're not fine, okay? And I've heard it from so many people that I've dealt with that were under demonic attack. Are you okay? I'm fine. When they're not under demonic attack and they're fully there, I found that I'm okay. Everything's good. But when they're under demonic attack, for some reason, they just say, I'm fine. And it's usually a deadpan voice. Well, I heard that from my wife. My daughter called her boyfriend in New York, and she said, I need you to pray for my mom. Something's going on right now at my house. I'll explain it to you later. Well, my wife came back upstairs, and she just looked at us with this dead stare and said, stop praying. And I looked at her and said, babe, we're not praying. We're just talking right now. And she said, stop praying. Someone's praying. Well, what has turned out was my daughter's boyfriend was in New York praying, and it was having an effect here. So that is probably the most defining moment in my life, when I could actually keep my cool and deal with something that was attacking my family and have a good outcome. As you can see, she's fine. She's fine, okay? But to have that kind of support for a wife supporting a husband that's doing this kind of work, I couldn't ask for a better partner in this. She doesn't get involved in it at all. However, she has assisted with several exorcisms at the church when it is a female client. Father Rodriguez knows that she has fully recovered from it and is doing great. So if I didn't have her support, I couldn't do this, because my whole family is in danger when I do this. These things don't care. All they want to do is hurt you. And if it can hurt her to hurt me, it will. So that's the most defining part of my career. And like I said, I've never spoken about this publicly, but it's time for that story to come out, because it definitely tells you a lot about how vicious and evil these things are. So, thank you.
Thank you, and amen.
Want to be on our show, Bill Stern? Be a guest on our show?
Anytime.
Thanks. Well, to add a little bit to the Lucas case that my brother Carl was talking about, this was in 1980. My brother and I were both, and boy's uncle, were both really thrown. Thrown is that this guy was a weightlifter, and he was a frail 14-year-old boy. But when it started, before it started actually, we interviewed the family like a week before, and I asked them what their religion was. They said they were Catholic, and they were going to arrange for an exorcism. And of course, my brother and I were invited to assist, and I thought, wow, I'll be honored to do this. I'll actually assist a Catholic priest in an exorcism. And when we arrived there, it wasn't really set up like I thought it would be. And they had a big punch bowl on the table with all fruits in it and everything. What is that? That's the refreshments? No, that's the holy water. No, candles around and everything. And I asked someone, where's the priest? There's no priest. There's a breweria. This is Santorian exorcism. So we were in for it. And we were sitting in a semicircle, and the boy was, before the boy came under possession, his aunt started chanting, and you got what is called the warning, like in the parent household, before the window almost smashed to pieces when it went down, and before the chaos started, you could feel this aura, I would call it, like about 3 to 5 second warning. You felt that, where it's draining out of you, and all of a sudden there was a rumble going across the floor. Thought it was a truck driving by or an earthquake, but it was centered, and it went until it reached where my brother was sitting. Now, my brother was sitting in a fairly large family easy chair, sitting there, and all of a sudden, with my brother and the chair starts going like this, right across the floor. And then the boy went under possession, screaming and everything. During the course of that exorcism, the exorcist herself went under full demonic possession. She was taken over by her familiar spirit who lived in a little black Buddha statue. Suddenly she jumped up and went like in a grand mal seizure, smashed onto the table, smashing the holy water. She got up uninjured and began in this sweet sing-songy, her eyes were narrowed. Now when somebody goes under demonic possession, usually their face will become transfixed and not change expression. Either the eyes will dart around very, very quickly, they'll roll back into the sockets, exposing the whites, or they'll become very narrow and serpentine and dark. That's to prevent you from making eye contact, because there is some power in that. The eyes are the window to the soul. That's why that happens. And this, the exorcist began, the breweria, began swaying back and forth in Spanish, saying, I will tell your fortunes, you come around, gather, oh, I want my fortune told, everybody gathered around. Carmine will tell your fortune. Meanwhile, Lucas is just sitting there against the wall in a daze. And I'll tell your fortune, I'll tell him. I'm thinking, that's not what we're here for. See, demons work together. They work together in situations such as this. And she called my brother and I already noticed us because we're twins, and called us over and said, your mother is going to get sick, but she's going to get very, very ill. I will come and cure her, and then you will know I have power. Well, I said, you know, by the grace of God, she is not. And my mother did live healthily for another 40-something years, and died peacefully at the age of 94. So that shows that demons don't always tell the truth, do they?
Thank you.
All right, we have learned very, very much about our panel of demonologists from just the first two questions. To change things up a little bit, instead of asking one general question and have everyone answer it again, does anyone have a particular question for a particular panelist? Question for Carl, question for Sean?
I have a question for Keith Johnson. It's a short one, though.
You don't need a microphone, go ahead.
Keith Johnson, are you gonna eat those scallops? I don't want them, I mean, I'll take them off your hands.
I was gonna have you warm up, but Mike didn't even get it to.
I thought they were at least. I think you should give over to Mike. Oh, never mind.
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's great. See, I'm keeping mine short.
Each one of these men have had very individual experiences in,
Hey.
do you have one for one?
Hey.
Hi guys. It's not specific, but if anybody can answer this directly, I'd appreciate it. I have a nephew that's battling addiction, and I've heard of an addiction demon, and I want to know, has anybody specifically on the panel dealt with that, or know of it, or that kind of thing? Just whatever information, that'd be great.
Who can answer a question about an addiction?
So as, you know, as one of the few people, of course, Keith is ordained as well. I believe you just received the diaconate, right?
Yes.
Congratulations. But as somebody that is clergy and has been ordained in two different Christian belief systems, or same ideologies, but of course one being Catholicism, there is a prayer of healing. As far as the connection between addiction and demons, I think we can look at it in a psychological sense that we can understand what addiction is compared to the medieval archaic times where we tend to believe it to be demons, like pestilence, you know, when we had loss of crops, we blamed that on Pazuzu, of course, and other demons that would form an idea, because we were so misunderstanding. But as far as addiction, anything we do, especially an exorcism, because the father of medicine, Hippocrates, back in Greece, performed exorcism on people as a form of psychotherapy. So there's always a sense of psychotherapy in what we do as demonologists, even though there is a spiritual, preternatural element. For him that is battling addiction, and if he has faith, a prayer of healing done upon him might suffice. It might click something in his brain that takes the utilization of the addiction. But unfortunately, just like a demonic possession, once you invite something in your life, you're the one that has to be a part of the piece of the puzzle to get rid of it. So if he's not willing to get over that addiction, then it's a really hard vote to have him get away from that addiction. But of course, that's a whole nother subject. So.
This is, real quick, piggyback on that. This is, the work I'm going to talk about right now is from Jerry Marcinski. He's a clinical psychologist. He was working with a man who was addicted to cocaine. And the man was a very wealthy business executive prior to his addiction. And what was happening was this man was in the throes of addiction to the point that, you know, he would come in, get clean, and the voices in his head would leave him. So finally, this pattern, this behavioral pattern had become so pronounced that Dr. Marcinski actually pulled him aside one day and said, can you explain to me why you're up and down, right? You're like a roller coaster. You get clean, you get your family back together, you get your credit back up, get your job back, next thing I know, you're back in rehab. And he said, you know what, Doc? He said, it's something that I've never really shared with my family. It's something that I really keep close to my heart. He said, but I want to give you an idea of what my night life is like. He said, so imagine that I do have my job back. Imagine that my credit score is back up. My wife does love me again. I've reconciled with my family. He said, and I've weaned myself off this cocaine addiction. He said, then I'm in the bed at nighttime. Maybe it's 3 a.m. in the morning. And the voice tells me to get in my car. This is a living entity. It's not, it's independent of his consciousness. Get in the car, go to the stoplight, take a right. And he's crying. He said, Doc, I don't understand it. I'll drive for 25 minutes. And I'll be landing in a cornfield. I got chills, man. It's very interesting, fascinating research. But he said, it's pitch black. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how I got here. He said, all I know is I'm told to bend down and pick up that black duffel bag. He said, and then I'll open the black duffel bag, and there's a kilo of cocaine in there. So there was an entity that had attached himself to both the addiction and his life in general. But he was using the addiction as a way to kind of coax him in to having a covenant relationship. It's a symbiotic relationship. And so the thing was with him, once he got off of the addiction, the voices stopped speaking to him. And so that was the battle. And I do believe that these are entities, and like my friend James said, you do have prayers for that. But addiction is not just always something chemical. There are entities that are independent of it, that will manipulate that towards their ends.
I just want to do a little mention too, is that I think something to realize is that when a person indulges in drugs and any sort of things like that, you're actually lowering your vibration. And by doing so, you're actually lowering yourself to their level. You have the lower vibrational entities in this realm, and then you have the astral realm, and then you have these other realms. They want you to be on their level, so you're more susceptible to their psychological and emotional attacks. So people who are having addiction issues, they want to actually have you on their level because they can influence you, and then they're sucking up that negativity by continuously having that cycle go on and on. I actually give you a little story too. One of my first paranormal conferences I went to 11, 12 years ago, I met this man who, at a conference, he actually wrote a book about going to hell. And what happened to him, really amazing story, is that he was a drug addict. And his wife didn't even know that he was a drug addict. And what happened was he snuck out, he was in a drug house, and he started to have an overdose. And out of nowhere, the entire house, he explained, filled up with shadows. The next thing you know, he's in this, what you'd expect, hell. I mean, like 15-foot creatures whipping people, just the sulfuric smell. And he said in that one instance, it felt like an eternity. And that makes sense to us because there is no conception of time. So just imagine being in that one moment and feeling like an eternity. And he said that there was a goat-like creature on his left that was actually scratching him, and a donkey creature was biting him on his other side. And in this moment, he was praying out to God, please take me out of this, please, let me leave this place. And this hand came out of the sky and took him out, pulled him out, and he actually awoke in the drug house and just ran home and went to sleep. And when he awoke, he had the scratch marks on his left side and the donkey bite mark on his right side. And here's the kicker. For a few weeks after this, which his wife never knew, she would constantly complain of the smell of sulfur all around her husband. And he became a changed man after that, and changed his life and became something positive. But I'm just giving a spiritual example of people and doing drugs and lowering your vibration because we're here to make a difference in a good way. And we don't want to waste our life by doing such things because we're not helping anyone, especially not ourselves, by doing that. And just like all these other gentlemen I actually mentioned, you have to be able to help yourself, so you can get the help you deserve. And it's just like, you remember the show Addiction, or what was on A&E, what was it, Intervention. They all sit there and they have to agree to be able to help themselves. And it doesn't have to be drugs, it might be spiritually related or disrelated. And even myself, I've been oppressed by an evil spirit. At the beginning, I was coerced to play with the Ouija board, and something had its way with me. But I got out of it, and I know that God let me go through that, so I get a deeper understanding of what people actually go through on a psychological, emotional level in that dark place. And it's kind of like being a drug counselor to a drug addict, that this drug counselor used to be a drug addict, so you can be like, we can relate on that level, because I've been in that dark place. But, you know, the element of indulging and doing drugs, you're lowering yourself to, you know, the plane of these dark things where they exist, and that's where they can influence you more.
Thank you very much.
Right, that's so everyone could hear you. That was a very interesting question. Thank you very much. I have a question for whoever would like to answer it. Okay, I'll ask and then I'll get that. What do you consider to be the biggest misconception about demonology? What would you like to clarify? These people have an interest in demonology. They've read about it, they've watched a few TV shows or whatever. You have an interested audience. What would you like to clarify? Which misconceptions? Anyone want to answer that? Well, then, Sean?
I mean, I'm sure they'd all agree. I mean, you watch all these shows, you watch movies, and it gets pretty eccentric. I mean, people assume that most of these hauntings are demons. It's not the case. And a lot of these hauntings we go into are basically human souls. They're, you know, for whatever the reason, they have not crossed over, they have not transitioned, and they're more consumed with the human life that they once lived, and they can't let go of it. It might be something more tragically related because of the way they died, were they sick, were they murdered, they want justice for the death, or were they a bad person in life and they are afraid of judgment, so they stick around and they keep that personality and an energetic consciousness of energy and continuously do that. And when people move into a home, they might say things like Satan to you and scary things, but when in fact they're really just trying to induce some sort of negativity. Even though it's a negative spirit, it's not an inhuman spirit. And there's certain characteristics of what we would be looking for if it was truly demonic. That would be out of nature from just the typical haunting. So I mean, there's a lot of cases where you go in and the people think it's a demon, but we fear the unknown. We don't know. We speculate what these spirits are doing, when they're doing it, and what their intention is, and that's something that we learn how to disseminate with our knowledge and our experience as demonologists.
So one of the things that I learned going through Catholicism and working with an exorcist directly, one of the things that is the biggest misconception is the scratches that everybody seems to get timid over. They do scratch in some form. But most of the time when the scratches compare into the aspect of 3, which we feel like is of course a slap into the face of the Holy Spirit, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But anytime I've always come across demonic cases, scratches that have occurred, usually tended to have no inflammation marks, which is the redness that appear around the scratch. If you scratch yourself right now, if you want to, you can try to attempt it. You'll have inflammation from the physical impact of you scratching yourself or anything that you rub up against. It will create an impact into your skin. Anytime I've seen the demonic scratch, there is no inflammation. It is like taking a razor and cutting yourself, just the blade. And these are serrated cuts. And an individual could be 3, mostly 3, because it is a symbology that we recognize the demonic. So of course they want to play upon the theatricals. But anytime I've come across the true demon, the inflammation was not there. And anytime that somebody does come across it, sends me a photo of it. It's not the defining point because the demon could have had them scratch themselves. So there's dynamics that could have been played, but we gotta remember, a demon, by demonology lore, is a celestial being that never walked this planet Earth. That means they never had a physical body. So they would not leave a physical mark in the way that we would as a physical body.
So much of my work is centered around the Dybbuk phenomenon, the Dybbuk phenomenon in the 16th century. A lot of, for some reason, religious pop culture would like a lot of people to believe that the Dybbuk is simply about a haunted wine box. I wish that was the case. The case studies of the Dybbuk in the 16th century are the most horrific, horror means just transcendent, even fascinating cases of possession we have to date. The concept of the Dybbuk was literally the impregnating of the dead in the bodies of the living. So you would have case studies where women would get possessed. They would go to the Kabbalistic exorcist, and the entity itself would have curled up in her womb like a baby in a fetal position, where your physicians actually felt 2 heartbeats, 2 pulses in the same body. So I think that's the biggest misconception. And I think that's just because, a lot of us, especially I knew when I was first getting into this research, I was limited to Western scholarship. And so, whatever I saw on television, I thought that was what's really true. And unfortunately, it's not. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions in the field of demonology is understanding that, number one, the Dybbuk phenomenon has a lot more case studies and data to add to the phenomenon of possession than perhaps anything out there. So I wanted to add my little tidbit to that.
One thing that I'd like everyone to know is that all these shows on TV, they're great and they're entertainment, but they don't show the whole story. What you're seeing is what a producer thinks will make a good episode. But there's things that happen during these filmings and cases that they don't want to touch because a lot of it does revolve around demonology. And I think, Sean, I think you said that demonology is kind of like shunned a little bit in this field. People don't feel comfortable with it. And to try and explain it to someone that is not a believer, it's just easier for the television companies to avoid it. So keep in mind when you're watching these shows that it's a show, and there are real things that happen on the show, but they do change a lot of situations. So keep that in mind when you're watching.
I'll say something.
You want to say?
Just to give it, a little tidbit too, just like, he said too, watching these shows, it's for entertainment value, and there are elements in there that are real and genuine, but obviously these producers, all they care about is a cohesive story to make their story be told. And, just like he said, there's a lot more that happens way outside, what you see. It's life in general, before the case, during the case, and way long after the case. It's the lifestyle of these individuals, and that's something else too that, in my opinion, why we can't charge people to actually do this sort of thing, because there's no guarantee that we can actually help these people. And, it's really not about us just going in there with proton packs and sucking up these ghosts. We're going to try to help these people, but it's really up to them and the lifestyle and how they choose, because a lot of these cases, these people invite these things right back into their house. And in these days, because of the Hollywood spectrum that's involved in the paranormal, people will use their houses and their hauntings to literally be their catalyst to think that to get fame. And you go in, it wouldn't matter if we turned a house into a freaking church, if they don't have the intent, even only subconsciously, and they're only spewing lies out, we're in trouble here. We cannot help these people, and we can actually put ourselves in danger to actually go into these people's homes if they have that intent for materialistic reasons. And something I just wanted to add is that if you really want to learn about this stuff and have a knowledge and be outside the TV entertainment world, is read these books. That's what I think a lot of us did, was read these books about the craziest scenarios that can take place in these cases during the pioneering years. Just like Carl and his brother here that have been on, people that are around during those times when it was really truly respected. Not many people were doing this sort of thing. They literally have to look up somebody in Yellow Pages to find a parapsychologist or someone like the Warrens to be like, hey, can you help me? Because most of these little towns would probably want to shun them and kick them out of the neighborhood. I'm sure you guys have actually experienced that. It's like, nobody wants to. Nowadays, everybody wants to talk about it. Everyone's curious about it. That's because the entertainment business is melded into the paranormal and the supernatural field. And there's good and bad that comes with that, because you have a lot more openness to people believing in this sort of thing, but it comes a lot more with ignorance and people's intentions and why they want to be involved and why they want to do sort of things. And we deal with all the characteristics of Hollywood and the jealousy and the envy. And it's so funny. It's just like, if you're truly a spiritual person, we should all be working synergistically together for the greater good. We should be happy for each other, for the achievements we do, and ultimately the most important thing is to be helping people with the knowledge and experiences that we do have. And I think that's the ultimate goal from all of us. And I think ultimately God as well.
Well, I want to.
Oh, now we.
Led into this, that there's misconceptions by some people that every Catholic priest is an expert on casting out demons. Every Catholic priest is an automatic exorcist, and Catholic priests are human too. They're individuals. And a lot of people think, well, I'll call up the diocese and they'll immediately send someone out. That's not always the case. It is the job description, but with the parent case, for example, and this is going back to 1970, the early 1970s, when they first started having major problems, they went to their church for help. You know, it doesn't show that in the movies of The Conjuring so much, but they did first try their local parish priest in church. And because of the rumors, and which were true, of course, of the haunted house they were living in, the priest actually approached Mr. and Mrs. Parent and said, "We'd advise you, maybe you could do us a favor and send your kids someplace else to school and church rather than here, because you're making people very nervous." So,
Wasn't always popular, was it?
No. Talk about jobs description.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah, victim of its own popularity now. Does anyone else?
Well, I have one more question, so.
If not, I'll ask it, so. All right,
All right,
well,
ladies.
a lot of these people are paranormal investigators that have bothered to come to this dinner and seek your advice and listen to what you have to say. What if they are out, someone said they heard noises in their house, they go out, they do a simple investigation, they're taking EVPs, and they've got whatever spirit boxes, or just walking around asking questions, and they come up against something that they can't explain. They hear a growl, they hear a voice that they interpret to be a demon or something evil, something not of this world. What should they do immediately as opposed to calling one of you guys?
So, one of the worst things that we do as humans, especially that we read books and watched the movies, we jump to the conclusions as soon as possible. And of course, we hear growls, we hear all these other things, and we jump. Of course, most of us have said it up here, especially Sean, like who have had experience in Carl, and Keith have had experience with the television form of it. You see that these things are heightened. So for those people that are experiencing this right then and there, the best thing I would say to them is to stop all communication, say a prayer, and dissimulate from the situation. Because if you think about it, the more you interact, the more you speak, you open a lot of communication. So I would definitely stop it, say a prayer regardless of what faith you are, and then go back to living your life, and then seek help. One thing that is important for all of us, yes, we are specialists in a field, a part of a branch of theology, that branch term in geology called demonology. But the one thing that we all do up here, and I can speak for myself, is we utilize other specialists. The more people you have in the boat to row, the boat moves faster, right? So for that person, I would definitely tell them to stop. I know a lot of paranormal investigators, and this is my personal perspective and opinion, is that if you have activity in your house, he wants to say something, so after this I'll let him say something. But the worst thing you can do is investigate your own house, add interactivity to it, because you think about it. They say you work at work and your home life at home, right? And you live a perfect life. It's not all the case of a perfection, but definitely stop. You feed into it when you start dabbling in your own home.
You wanted to say something?
I just want to say this fun people.
Yes.
We're not going by yet.
I'll say one thing.
What to do, yeah, I don't want you to take my turn away from me, okay? Anything else?
You got nothing.
You got nothing. What people should do is keep or take back a sense of ownership of their own home. You don't have to be subject to this. Don't let it disturb you, drive you out. I know it's gonna get tricky if you see things moving about your house or start hearing voices. Observe it. Don't confront it. You know, don't yell at it, and don't record it if you don't want to hear a voice speaking back to you in your own home. It can be disconcerting. But take ownership of your home. You know, it's more easy, I think, to say what not to do. Don't yell at it. Don't confront it. Don't say, "What do you want from us?" You know, don't say, "How did you die?" And record it. You know, just They usually are cyclic and they pass these spates of activity, and just don't let it assume control, always assert ownership of your own home. Not forcefully, but commandingly and consistently.
You know, obviously this stuff is endlessly fascinating, and you know, I don't know if this example, lean towards someone who's already an investigator who might want to, and now look at it in their own home, and it might be exciting to some people, but when the truth comes to, fruition here is that your home needs to be your sanctuary. That's the place where you need to be safe with you, your loved ones, whoever's living there. And I think such a profound element that we're dealing with here is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement gives energy to spirits, good and bad, human and inhuman. And just to give an example, I'm sure you guys, a bunch of you know the story about Annabelle. What took place with Annabelle? Obviously the mom brought the doll back and the apartment with the friends, and all of a sudden weird things start happening. They call a psychic there, and the psychic says it's a little girl named Annabelle that drowned, and all of a sudden they feel bad for the spirit, and what do? They sit the freaking doll at the dinner table and like, here, have some tea. And all of a sudden Lorraine Warren and Ed get there and they're like, yeah, it's really a demon. And in this case, I'm just giving an example. It's like, you're acknowledging this doll as if it's a real human being. You're giving it that energy. And then it's looking for that level of acknowledgement to the point where it don't even care if you find out what it's doing, because then it has the permission to actually do the level of attacks that it ultimately wants to do, the chaos within and around you. So, that's why even like the cases that I've gone on, I try to tell people, like, I know it's interesting, but you can't do this in your home, because these things know. These things know if you're gonna let them back in, and if you're gonna sit there. And I know it's hard, because us as investigators, we sit here, you sit in a quiet room, and you hear a little creak, you're like, what was that? What was that? Every little noise, we're just like, you could be affected by that, but you have to be careful of that, because these spirits are looking for reasons to connect to you for whatever that true intent of that individual spirit is, whether it's good or bad. But that's how these things can lurk back and continue the cycle, whatever type of haunting it ultimately is. And your home's your sanctuary, keep it that way.
I got it. Okay, to fellow investigators, if you come across something in a home that you feel is demonic, don't be afraid to ask for help from somebody that is specialized like us in this. Look, these things have been around forever, literally. And like Sean said, time means nothing to them. So if you as an investigator challenge one of these entities, and it happens to be a demonic, it's not gonna maybe take that challenge right then and there. It's gonna wait for you to be at your weakest point, and then it's gonna come in and do what it wants to do. Because once you make that challenge, that invitation, it doesn't go away. It's still there, So don't think that you have to be the hero that has to banish this evil thing from these people's home, because not only can it make it worse for those people, but it can affect you, your family, your loved ones. So get the right people in there. As an investigator, investigate, report, find the evidence, and then give it to someone who can actually help. So that's my best advice. I mean, don't try and challenge these things on your own. So with that, keep investigating them.
Real quick, this is kind of a specialized case study, but especially when dealing with an incubus. If you're the man and you don't want to challenge that entity. I had a case where the husband really didn't believe that his wife was being afflicted by an incubus entity until one day it was literally laying in between him and her at nighttime. You could feel it and see the bed begin to move. He challenged it. And the entity waited until he was asleep and punched him right in the face and gave him Bell's palsy.
Wow.
So this is not like, macho, we're gonna go, find each other in the back alley. You're dealing with a very sophisticated victimology who will do his best to separate the husband from the wife. And yeah, sometimes he would possibly try to impregnate her, which we even know it's not public, but it's true. We have case studies where we've left samples samples. We don't know how, but they've left samples. So especially if it's an incubus case, and don't challenge it. Look for somebody that is a specialist, because that entity will take it as a challenge, and it's not really fun.
Well, obviously, the challenging thing, do not challenge it at all. I mean, literally, these things are looking for the right terminology, the right specific words, where it can turn into an inadvertent invitation. And like they said, it can come at any point in life. I've been on a case where someone played with the Ouija board. This family, their boy was being attacked by something, and I went to their house, and something came up regarding the Ouija board. They didn't do anything paranormal or nothing, and they admitted to me 30 to 40 years prior, when they were like teenagers and high school lovers, going, like playing with the Ouija board, and out of nowhere, their son is 8, 10 years old, being visited by a hooded, red-eyed thing, telling him to cut himself. And this is coming out of nowhere. So these things will wait dormantly, patiently, easily, where you have no freaking clue it has anything to do with the paranormal. And they want the best chance to victimize you, so they're going to use that tactically. We're talking about a species that is at war with our kind from the shadows. So just think about that, and take that into account when you approach this stuff. It's no joke.
Just ask Arnie Johnson.
Yeah, exactly, good, perfect example.
After listening to that, has anyone come up with one more question to anyone?
That's good, because we've run out of answers.
Trust me, these guys will
We
never
could
run
always
out of answers
talk. We could talk.
or words.
What happened to the guy in the earpiece?
Speaking of your home as your sanctuary, as amateur investigators, or at least speaking for myself and my wife, is there anything we can do or say or investigate anywhere just to ensure nothing follows us back home?
So the best thing I would say is that, of course, being a man that was in the military, the army, I use the analogy that you can wear body armor and you still can get shot and die. But the best thing you can do is, of course, prevention, and prevention is critical in every aspect of life. And wearing medals, iconography that resembles your faith, resembles good and good intentions within you, is key, because it's like warding off a talisman. It has a positivity that you invoke once you look at it. And of course, there's the faith aspect of it. So wearing, of course, something of religious iconography is key, a medal, a talisman, whatever follows your suit and your belief system. But what you can also say are prayers before, and I think there is a key command. It's not like you're not kind of challenging the spirit, but there's a key command when you first enter a location. You cannot affect me, and if you are religious, of course, you cannot affect me in the name of Jesus Christ. But what's more important is, I think a lot of people don't realize, you close this section once you're done. You cannot follow me home. You are not allowed to in the name of Jesus Christ. Of course, you can expound upon that, but there's these things that you make notice to the spirit. They still might follow you home. You still might get affected, but those are the percentages. Those are the things that you deal with. That when you are dealing with the unknown, it's called the unknown for a reason. So sometimes you gotta expect at least unexpected, and you can do anything you want, but sometimes doesn't mean that you won't be touched either.
I'll say.
Yeah, when we used to give ghost hunts, the evening tours at historic Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the site of the American Industrial Revolution, 3 thoroughly haunted historic buildings. And I instituted a ghost tour program there, and people could come in and perform paranormal investigations with us, with our team. And it was ghost hunting, but we always used to have a note of finality. And if I forgot that, I was like, oh shoot, hopefully we didn't have any trouble on the way back, But and one lady would have, actually 2 ladies and a friend, and they would have something bother them at home afterwards. So we made very sure we had a sealant. Always say, we thank you for responding to, assuming that you're, communicating with some kind of quasi-intelligent entity. Do not follow us from this place. We respect you. This is your place of business. We are your guest, but we ask that you do not follow us. You cannot leave this building, but we hope you find the peace you are seeking. So always say something. If my brother was participating, he would always say, invoke a prayer. So yeah, it's important, as James was saying, to, close that door, seal it, and make it conscious. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Just say you're not going to come back with us. That's the way it is. And if you do get something that comes back, it should be minor, like maybe a rat on the wall or something like that. But yeah, just make sure you say some notes of closure. It can really make a difference with something not following you.
I think an important thing to mention here is that all of us that investigate the paranormal here up in this table and all of you that do that sort of thing, we take risks doing this. There is no guarantee of any of your safety, and we can take every precaution necessary, and something still, like you said, will follow you home. But wouldn't you prefer to take every precaution necessary to see if you can avoid that situation? And that's something that's, I think, important. I actually say a prayer, a specific prayer before I leave a property. I bring holy water with me if I'm in my car, say for instance, and I'll give you an example. I would say, I revoke any permission for any evil spirits to follow me home. In the name and authority of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, in the blessed Mother Virgin Mary, Mother of God, name all angels and saints and the blessed apostles Peter and Paul, and I cover this car, my heart, mind, body, and soul with the blood of Jesus Christ, and I fear no evil. Amen. And I'll throw holy water around my car and go home. And I bless my place constantly too, because being a medium, being sensitive, stuff happens on and off. But again, taking every precaution necessary to try to avoid that stuff. And obviously, we're versed in more of like the religious aspect, so that's why we do that sort of thing. But obviously, looking into whatever fits for you and to avoid that, whatever you can do would be best. Okay.
It wasn't a demon, guys. What was that?
So, this is actually from the Eastern ancient perspective. They believe that just as the antidote carries the disease in it, that the exorcistic rite would also carry the curse in it that is reversing. And so a lot of ancient exorcists, whenever they would encounter an entity, they would rely on what they felt they're being fallen. If they had something occur, they would simply take that emotion and that attack and reverse it. So that's why when Jesus and Yeshua in the first century, he would do that oftentimes. So if it was a spirit of fear, he would actually terrify the spirit of fear, because he would actually reverse the curse, just like the antidote has the disease in it. So I've learned, especially with depression, suicide spirits, that works tremendously. It's a weird aspect to it, but there's a measure of psychology at the same time. So a lot of times if I do feel an attachment, or if I'm going into a place that I don't want an attachment, I will make sure to say something like that, to where if I do feel it, you just reverse it, and it kind of separates you from that entity.
Okay, I agree 100% with the prayers, cleansing prayers after you leave. But I just want to go back and touch on one thing. When I said that the invitation that you made with like a Ouija board, maybe it was 30 years ago, all right? I don't want you to say, oh no, I'm doomed, it's going to happen now. There is something you can do. What you can do is you can ask God to cleanse you of that activity and renounce any involvement in it. And that should rescind the invitation that you made. It kind of unbinds that contract. So it may have been something innocent when you were a little kid, that you were using a Ouija board and it wasn't your intent to contact the demon. Matter of fact, I don't know anyone that usually uses a Ouija board and expects to contact the demon. Well, some people do, I guess, but just normal kids doing that kind of stuff. Yes, it is an invitation, but when you get older, you can rescind that invitation, and then, you don't have to worry about it. So I figured I'd just point that out.
And on that note, considering the subject matter that we've all been discussing, I would just like to, if we could all take a deep breath, just relax for a moment. I'd just like to say, in the name of our Creator God, may nothing unholy, inhuman, or even unpleasant be allowed to follow us from this place or attach itself to us. May the peace of the Lord shine upon you, His grace rest upon you, give you peace. Amen. Amen. Love you, Sandra.
Hey, dinner's ready.
And a hand for the hardest working man in hospitality.
Thank you, Elise, very much.
I want to thank everyone who came here tonight for communication. James would like to say a few words to close this thing.
So everybody, if you didn't hear from me, if you have a card, if you didn't have a card, I apologize. You know, thank you to you guys. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the panelists. I hope you guys took something out of this. Most of you guys have spoken to us today and have learned how to get in contact with us. You know, Carl and I run Demonology. You can reach us demonology.org, and we can get you in contact with any of these gentlemen, if it any so, but Sean Austin, Carl Johnson, Michael Salerno, Nathaniel Gillis, and Keith Johnson, Sandra Johnson, and Alicia Mark and Carlson. Thank you very much, guys, and thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed your time.
Can we get that quick picture of the
I see what people ran. I didn't, oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, Tony's a good friend of mine. Yep, he's a good guy.
What's your name?
Michael Salerno. Nice to meet you. Oh, okay, very nice. Good. Keep up the good work.
I always do. Amen. What's your name? Keith Johnson.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. God bless.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Carl,
Guys, look at you getting away from
No, Caleb,
Stop.
no.
Stop. Now he's like.
Sing a song quietly. Yeah, sing a song quietly, no screaming.
All right, we doing a picture?
Yeah, look, Keith.
Oh, come on, get in here.
I gotta get on.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, I got it.
I want you to start.
You get us in? It's all of us in? Panoramic.
Ready? Smile.
No, you wanna go straight to back?
All right, there you go.
Thank you. Guys. Hey, spray a little.
I know.
We're trying to get very YouTube show. We're done.
I know, I've seen it. Yeah.
That's a success. Yes, we're doing it all over again.
Like I told James, I said, nobody knows me, but I know who everyone else.
That's why he's quiet all the time.
Sorry if you're.
I like that.
Yeah, he's got your bad voice.
It was brutal. It was brutal. I'm just glad that I just continued coming back.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, when you guys were standing up there, just so you
At
have
least that night.
Cool, man. Thank you. All right.
Hey, you getting tired?
Hey guys, just finished the panel. Figured let you guys watch that. Hope you were able to hear everything. A little interesting for you guys.
Yes, I will.
Taking the orders.
No problem, guys. Hope you guys were able to hear some of that, some really fascinating stories, and hope everyone enjoys their night. Nice little fun time here in Massachusetts. And hey, Julia, Rachel, Pam, Lover, Deb, Dom. No problem, Sarah, Sharon. Cool. Glad you guys heard everything. Some good subject matter and questions and stuff. So,
All right, guys, have a wonderful evening, and I shall be on. Definitely be doing some streaming next week. I'll let you guys know what's up. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you all. And talk to you later.
That's up to him, man. It's up to you.